The very first step is to determine the correct welding lead. So we notice that there's no push-pull motor, so it's a standard lead or whip. But also, this power pin, it's an FSC connector, or it's called a Fronius system connector. So we know it's a Fronius lead for the new style machines. If you're not sure which welding lead you're using, you can always look at the white tag on the welding lead, and it will give you information such as the product description. You can see this is a 320i US style, 15 feet, 60-degree neck, and then it also gives you the part number for reordering, so you order the correct contact tips, clamping pieces, and then also the inner liner. So the inner liner will have the part number and description, but it's also color coded in the top right as well. Go ahead and rip the liner out of the bag because you're going to want it loose for installation. Make sure you have welpers ready because you're going to have to cut the slack of the liner. I always lay my lead or whip in a straight line to ensure that there's no slack in the inner liner during the cutting or installation process. But I'm going to run the liner through the front end of the diffuser all the way through the power pin, and then once I can't push any more to the diffuser, that's when I grab my contact tip and I thread it in all the way hand tight. And then I know the liner's butted against the tip, and then I'm going to grab my welpers and just snug it tight so that way I know it's not going to come loose during welding. There is a couple different nozzles. This is the standard, but there is a narrow groove nozzle like so if you get tight areas. Take your welpers, cut it flush against the power pin or the Fronius system connector. Now if you twist the bundle counterclockwise, what it will do is it will suck the inner liner inside the lead like this. Rotate the torch clockwise, and what it will do is force the inner liner out of the torch so you can screw on or thread on your clamping piece. Your clamping piece is actually your set screw, and it locks the inner liner in the lead or the bundle. So thread it on till it bottoms out. Rotate counterclockwise, push in, quarter turn, twist until it's completely seated. You'll notice there's a QR tag on all the Fronius professional welding tools. Open up your iPhone to the camera, and Safari will bring you to the correct landing page for that product where you can download manuals, operation instructions, and so on. On the TransSteel 2200, you have a solenoid for MIG, a solenoid for TIG. The on-off switch is on the right, so click it to turn it on, click it to turn it off. Then you have the slot for your power plug, which could be 110 or 220 volt. On board is a air filter, a stainless steel air filter to collect dust and contaminants from getting inside your machine or caked on the PC boards. Now take your Fronius power plug, line up the larger rectangle, slide it in, twist till it locks in. Then you're going to take your standard 5/8 male inert gas fitting, and you're going to thread it in the correct process. So again, if you're MIG welding, screw it in the top. If you're TIG welding, screw it in the bottom. So I'm going to screw this in hand tight, and then I'm going to grab my crescent wrench and I'm going to put it snug tight so that way there's no leaks or gas loss. Then I'm going to take the on-off switch, turn it on, and you'll notice it goes through a boot up phase, but once it displays wire feed speed and volts, you're ready to go. You'll notice inside the wire feeder there's a slot for 1 to 2 pound spools and also 8 to 10 pound spools. Now over to the far left here we have the fan on demand. So if your fan ends up going out on you, you can easily replace it with just a screw versus ripping apart the whole machine. It is a 2-roll drive system. Right here's your tension setter, but also it dehinges the idle roller, and then also you have a spot for consumables. You'll notice on the bottom of the TransSteel 2200 there's an actual spare parts list for reordering. Disengage the tensioner and then the idle roller will come loose. Pull the pin out, put your roller in depending on what you're running, and line up the hole, slide your pin back in until it snaps tight. Then you're going to take your top roller, and this is what actually sits on the pin on the motor itself. So line up the pin, and you'll notice this is blue roller, so this is for 035. So once you line it up, give it a nice little push until it goes on. You'll notice down at the bottom right hand of the side of the feeder it tells you where to set your tension, but also which wire diameter matches which color. Take that screw that's inside the TransSteel 2200, and then what you're going to do is you're going to thread it in the center of this drive wheel, and all this does is ensures that the roller doesn't pull out during welding. So it's just going to be hand tight or snug tight with your fingers. Snap the top bracket down, And then the power pin, make sure this is loose. This is the screw that holds the power pin in. You want to make sure it's completely threaded out. Grab your welding lead and you'll notice this arrow at the top near the power pin. And you'll notice this arrow here on the TransSteel 2200. So you're going to line the arrows up. Once you line the arrows up, you're going to give it a nice little push all the way in. You'll notice the torch leads all the way in because you see this ridge. See that ridge? If you don't see that ridge, keep on pushing or unscrew it a little bit more to get it all the way in. Once you see the ridge, tighten it down. This is a long screw, so it does take some time, but tighten it down hand tight. Sometimes hand tight works all the way, but there is a Torx bit in the center to where you can get it even tighter. Now that we got our welding lead connected, take your ground cable and connect it to the minus on the front of the machine. If you are running self-shielded flux core, it would be on the positive, but for everything else, run it on the minus. Take your pigtail, run it to the positive side, and twist until it's tight. If you're loading an 8 to 10 pound spool, make sure you remove the thread cap to get the spool on the hub. It is a top side feed, not a bottom side feed, but you notice these hole openings. They match this peg on the hub itself inside the wire feeder, so make sure it lines up. And you'll notice if you got it lined up, because the spindle will move with the spool of wire. If the spindle's not moving with the spool of wire, then you don't have the hub lined up with the holes. Now make sure you put the cap back on, twist it tight so the spool can't fall off. And then you're going to take your hands and pull the wire out of the spool itself. Grab your welder helpers, give it a nice clippity-do. And then you're going to disengage the tensioner so it drops the idle roller. Guide it in with 2 hands. And once you get it going in, take your other hand, feed it in through the clamping piece, tighten it down, make sure your tension's good, ready to rock. You can feed the wire 2 different ways. You can feed it with the welding lead itself by holding down the trigger like this. It will come out slow, then after 5 seconds it will go into a jog, and then let go and it stops. Or you can use the jog feature on the front panel. So you push the button, it feeds, let go, stops feeding. Hold it down until it feeds all the way through. Now to set up your machine, you're going to go from left to right. So on the left side, you're going to choose what type of filler metal. So we're welding steel. In the middle, choose your wire diameter. We're using 030. Then on the right side, pick your gas mix. We are using 7525 CO2. On the top left, you have a cursor key where you can cursor to material thickness or plate thickness in thousandths. Hit the cursor key again, you have amperage and then wire feed speed. And then if you hit the top right hand corner, you can toggle between arc length, volts, and inductance. So here's your voltage, and that is how you set up your machine.